Yeah, I'll give the backstory. I think for the most part, I'll just hop in. For the most part, executive agent plays off of executive assistant, right? There's a lot of people though building these personal agents and showing how they're built, and it's usually like a sprawling workflow. I know Nate Herc has a video on that. Cole Medina, I think, has one. AI Workshop might have one. So everyone's building kind of a personal agent because, frankly, it's one the easiest to demo because you can prompt it to do something, right? And it does it there. Whereas like a lot of them, most of these agentic systems are just operating in the background autonomously. And so for a demo to happen, you would have to like unhook it and query it to go, or just sit there and wait and look at the logs and just wait till something happens. So this one's kind of the easiest one to build and demo and showcase the abilities, right? To start getting your brain going about what's possible. Um, and it's for a couple of reasons, and I'll hop in. So what I'm going to demo today is our executive agent. It's called Mallory. It's Weldon's ex-girlfriend's name. So it was a quick pick, but it's a pretty good name. Capabilities. Essentially, what we're trying to do is create an extension of you, like an executive assistant that's your second brain in a way. Um, and so all of your data gets captured, ingested into a database, synced with a vector database, and then the agent itself can perform RAG on it when need be, right? And so we're trying to capture all of the data that's happening inside of your ecosystem. So if you're sending emails or receiving emails, like that's data that's being created that we need to save, right? And that's also context that the agent needs to know to go perform actions later. So if you're having a conversation with somebody and you're asking your agent to go and send a follow-up message or do a sales outreach or generate a proposal or whatever it might be, it has to kind of know the context of the conversation that happened before, right? And who that person is. So one of the key pieces that we kind of figured out very early on was we need to kind of create a data sandbox in a way for the agents, right? And the sandbox should encompass, if you're a business, your entire business. If you're an individual, all of the data that is streaming into you, and your experience and all the data that you are creating, right? Obviously, it can't kind of like see or feel, like there's certain senses that it doesn't have, but at least the textual data, maybe some images as well, right? If you have those. So that's where the second brain concept comes from. And then obviously we're hooking it up to your tech stack, right? So it can take email actions, calendar actions, retrieve calendar events, retrieve emails. It can take Slack actions. Really, the Slack actions is kind of just responding to a Slack channel for now. There's not much else that we could really need out of it. Google Drive actions as well, like copying files, creating files, grabbing files for you. We hooked up our proposal generator to it. And then, we gave it the ability to search the internet, right? And so we could just keep expanding this, right? We have a client portal that's called Copilot. We could give it the Copilot actions as well. We could probably give it like instantly is something that we use, and maybe some other platforms that we use pretty consistently, right? Like Airtable. But for now, these are the ones that we have and the ones that I'm going to show today. The integrations today are just Gmail, Google Calendar, Slack, Google Drive, obviously interchangeable, right? If you have Microsoft, you can switch it out with the Microsoft suite. Tools that we use to build this are Airtable. That's where we kind of like configure the agent, manage it. And then N8N is where we actually build the agent and where it operates. OpenAI is obviously the LLM. Pinecone is the vector database. Supabase is the central source of truth, like database where it's capturing all of our contacts and all of that conversational data that we want to sync with Pinecone. And then Tavili is what we use to search the internet. I don't know if you guys have heard of this one, but we've been using it. It's pretty good, built for LLMs specifically, so we don't use Google SERP API anymore. And this one's been working pretty good for us. I would check it out if that's something you guys are interested in. And then we use our super agent architecture. So I'm kind of blowing through this because, frankly, I think the demo will illustrate most of it. But the way that we build it is a little bit different than what some of these other AI automation agencies are doing, right? You're probably used to seeing screenshots or videos on YouTube where it's just like this massive canvas of many different nodes inside of N8N, and it looks cool and it operates really, really well, but it's really hard to get in there and debug it. It's also really hard to make it modular, right? So our whole concept here is the super agent architecture. The concept is to standardize almost every single piece of an agentic workflow, an agentic system, except for the prompting, right? And so we call it a playbook, which is basically just a book of various different prompts that can tackle various different scenarios that you need, right? So if you need to re-engage old leads, there's a specific prompt for that. And when that scenario comes in, usually on a trigger, we pull that prompt and put it into the agent. The agent executes the task accordingly, right? Excuse me. What this allows us to do is first make our prompts really concise and precise. And then also we can test kind of the ability here, right? So like let's and also scale the capabilities. So one, the observability. We can break it down into specific tasks. And then as the agent's going and we're looking at the activity log, we know exactly what task it was supposed to do and whether or not it executed it in the right way. If the prompt was just massive and it tried to account for all of these scenarios, one, the reliability would go down. Two, we wouldn't actually know specifically if it followed the exact task it needs to follow, right? Because of how you would need to write that prompt. And then the third point that I said was scalability. So ideally, if you add your entire tech stack, so your entire ecosystem that you use, like all the software that you use to operate your business, you're syncing all of the data that's being created or added or stored on those pieces of software that you guys use, then your agent is pretty much an employee of your business at that point, right? It knows what's happening, and it can also take the actions on your tech stack just like your employee would, right? And what makes a good employee is one, obviously like experience and skills, but more importantly, the training that you give it, right? The purpose, the task instructions, the workflow instructions, how to do something, right? Your trade secrets. Maybe you have a process or workflow that's unique, and so you have to train up, this new college grad on what exactly to do. It's a very similar concept here. So some people, there's a wide spectrum on how people are handling these LLMs. One is like they're just trying to put too much on the LLM to figure out. There's no meet halfway point. And so the LLM's output is like pretty bad, right? The other is packing the prompt way too thick of context without having, because you're not giving it the ability to pull the context that it needs in the moment, right? So you're just packing it full of information, which decreases the reliability. What you need is kind of that Goldilocks zone where the prompt is precise and concise, and you give it the modularity and the ability to pull the context that it needs in the moment, right? So let me kind of get into this from, we'll just do a demo. So we have Mallory ported into our Slack here, the Slack channel. We also gave it an email address, so it's kind of a separate entity to us. And if I kind of go through this, like you can see, we've been talking to it today, pretty much asking about the webinar. Hey, what time's the webinar today? Agentic feature, blah, 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 1 p.m., right? Get me the deck. Had an issue getting the deck. I said, try again. Ross said a little funny thing here. And then it got me the deck, right? So if I open this up, it'll open up the deck that you guys just saw, obviously. I'm like, hey, make a copy of it actually and just call it executive agent deck. That's what messed up, right? When I went and looked at the logs, it was literally querying executive agent deck. So there's a little bit of a user somewhat learning curve, right? Like you kind of treat it as if it is autistic. That's kind of the best way I can illustrate it. Like be very literal about what you need, right? Anyway, so I said, make a copy of it, rename it to executive deck. It did that. I actually went and deleted this. So if I click this, it's going to be like it's in trash. Yeah. Let's just do it again. Make a copy of, it only has 10 sessions here for memory. So we'll just say executive agent and rename it to executive deck. Okay, while it's doing that, I'll go through this. So I said, thanks, blah, blah, blah. We had a conversation about a prospect earlier this morning that I missed. And so I was just asking it to give me a rundown, give me a nice little rundown. I'm going to kind of skip through that because I don't really want to show that. And then this is just me talking to like Ross and, Weldon and the team. And so Mallory just didn't respond, right? And then I asked how many people are signed up today. It wasn't able to find that information because that information isn't in the database, right? So that signals to me we're not capturing everything we need to capture, right? So I need to somehow give it access to those numbers, right? Then I asked it, give me the calendar event. It got me the calendar event, listed some of the people who are involved. And then, yeah, just a couple of tests. Unable to rename it. Let's go see what happened. Well, I'm going to go see what happened, but I'll kind of show you what we're looking at here if you're new to N8N. So we're in N8N, we're in our internal agents project. We have all of these workflows here. I added a tag called Mallory. So all of these workflows are associated with the Mallory agent, right? Everything with a black dot is kind of an automation that's not necessarily a tool. It's not necessarily a trigger. It's not an agent either, but it kind of supports it, right? And so this is kind of our RAG functionality that that Mallory calls, right? So it technically could be a tool, but it's more for the database itself. Everything with the bot is an agent, even a sub agent. So Slack, Google Drive, those are sub agents as well. Everything with a play button is a trigger. And so what we're doing is we're separating the data coming in, right? The real-time data that comes in, a new email happened, a new calendar event got created, a new comment got left on YouTube, whatever it is, that's an event that comes in through a webhook. And then we're passing it to the agent. So we're separating those workflows. We pass that to the agent. Well, prior to passing it to the agent, we're pulling the prompt for that scenario. Then we're passing it to the agent. Agent is doing the job it's supposed to do, and then it's outputting to the activity log, right? So let's kind of walk through this. So we have this Slack come in. This is for proposal generation. New Slack message comes in. We're grabbing the prompt. We're setting the prompt, the content, and the context, and then we're passing it to Mallory. We have a couple other agents running on this one as well. And then for Mallory, what she's getting is content, context, and then ideally she should be getting prompt. I'm not going to show that. She should be getting prompt. Now this was a test run with pin data prior, so let's go look at an execution where there was real data. Content, context, this is for proposal generation that I was testing this morning. Here we go. Prompt, context, and content, right? Content is just the incoming data. The prompt is obviously the prompt, and then context will give it that contextual information that it needs, right? So this is how we set it up prior to building the agentic database. And we're still working on it, frankly, because that's kind of a key piece. If it doesn't have the contextual data, it's not gonna perform reliably. It's not gonna output, the quality of output that you're looking for, right? It's gonna be very, very generic, and it's basically if you're just working with ChatGPT. So what we did prior to the agentic database is we said, okay, the trigger workflows is where we're basically going to build the payload that we send to the agent, right? So instead of it being one massive workflow where that's happening and it's basically static before it goes to the agent, we have various different sources of data that the agent needs to be able to field, right? This is how we get the autonomy out of it. This is how we move it away from AI automation to AI agent. The agent needs to work autonomously, but in order to do that, it needs to be triggered. In order to be triggered, it needs to connect to all the events that are happening. Well, if you have just one workflow where all of this is going on, you might have 10 different kind of triggers, and you would need to build the context along the way prior to hitting the agent for each of those triggers. And then we're not even talking about if you have multiple users, right? So by separating the workflows and making it modular, it really helped us kind of figure this out, right? And so for this scenario, this was when I asked it, get the calendar event. And so we have the content come here, right, which was my message, get the event. Then we have the context, which is session ID user, which is not relevant for the agent, but relevant for things down the line. And then we have the prompt, right? And we pulled that prompt from Airtable, which I'll get into in a second. And then I always add this at the bottom. Really should say today's date, but it says today's day. So that way it knows the time, right? And then I give it the calculator so it can calculate the time accordingly. If we look at the logs, this will tell us what steps it took, right? So first it checked the memory of our conversation. The model obviously had to read that and decide what it needed to do next. Then it hit the agentic CRM to figure out what Ross's email is, right? So it pulled that. Then it hit the LLM again to kind of ingest that information to figure out what to do after that. Then it hit the calendar agent to basically say, to pull like the webinar, right? So it sent in the query. It had the filter be for today, right? The 12th. And then it's ordering by start time, and it's using Ross's calendar to find that, right? And so now it's pulling up the upcoming events, sending it back to the LM to ingest. And then now it's calling the Slack agent to go ahead and send me that message back, right? The agentic feature, blah, blah, blah. And it'll send it to Slack. This will ingest it, right? See if there's anything else that needs to get done. Okay, nothing needs to get done. Let's go save what just happened back into the memory, and then we're done. And then we output, right? And this is where we output to the activity log. I actually just added this today, a separate activity log workflow, because, and now this will be a nice transition into Airtable, because we initially didn't have this readable log here. Well, first, what are you looking at? So we have the output of the agent. So if you look at the output, you see it's always output, and we always turn on intermediate steps right here, because that'll show step by step what happened, right? That's kind of the log. And then here we're basically saying, okay, just to keep track of what's happening, we need to have the output in here, right? And if there's an error, we'll have the error in here as well. And then we need to know what those intermediate steps are, right? So what I added today, honestly, this morning, was a separate workflow that basically took the logs. You can see if you read this, it's like, what's going on here? What am I supposed to extract from this, right? It's unreadable. So it basically takes the logs and then reformats it into something that's just obviously way more readable. I still don't think that this is kind of like the final form, because even just looking at this, it's like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with this information as a user, right? As a developer or tech person, like, yeah, okay, I understand what needs to happen here deeply, right? But if I'm a user or a layman and I don't quite understand the technology behind it because I don't have to, it should just work, I'm not sure that this really helps. So we're still trying to figure out what is the best way for a user to interact with agentic systems. I was talking to Daniel about this, and my team is probably annoyed with me saying this all the time, but like, I've really been focused on the user experience and user interface for agentic systems, because ChatGPT was that unlock moment for OpenAI and for AI in general. OpenAI had GPT-3, they had GPT 3.5 well before ChatGPT came out. And people who were in the know were building products off of this, right? I mean, we were getting kind of that text completion ability in our phones with that, when it didn't even really register that was like a new feature, but it was a nice to have, sometimes annoying, but a nice to have. And then they wrapped that LLM GPT 3.5 in ChatGPT and gave it to us in that form factor, and that's what blew it up, right? I think we're in the pre-ChatGPT mode for agentic systems right now. The next unlock is that user interaction, that user experience, right? The user interface. And we're trying to figure that out right now. And so you can see today, like, a lot of these are blank because I was basically just testing that out. This readable log is new. So for a while, it was just output and log. And then we were also indicating which agent is logging, right? So anytime there's an LLM taking actions, we want to basically log that, right? Because frankly, these LLMs are non-deterministic. You never really know what you're going to get. With traditional workflows without LLMs, we can just see the logs pretty easily and we know exactly what's supposed to happen, right? But for these, we kind of need to see, okay, what was it supposed to do, and did it do it, right? So anyway, that's about the logs. Let's talk about the playbook here. The core concept of what we're working on is building these to be, one, autonomous and like truly agentic, and two, scalable via natural language, right? If you have an agent and you want it to, let's say, like, I added this morning, proposal generator, right? All I had to do was get in here and just add it, right? And then hook up our proposal generator tool. But imagine it just had the tool already. We gave it all the tools, and all we needed to do was just write the prompt. And now all of a sudden it has a new responsibility as part of its role, right? If you're writing a job description, you have roles and responsibilities, and then you have training material around those responsibilities. And it's usually a detailed step by step on how to execute the tasks, right? Within that person's workflow, right? That role, for that role. So for this, it's very similar, except it's somewhat infinite, right? Because it's not a person. It's not working for 8 hours a day for 5 days a week. It's working 24/7 at all times, and it doesn't get tired or complain or ask for a raise. So the the expansion on what this thing can do is infinite. And that's the idea, right? And that's kind of what everyone's trying to crack with these agents. That's why everyone is overhyping them. And that's why developers who really know how difficult it is are underhyping them and fully disrespecting them right now, in my opinion. And that's why we're kind of in this weird limbo space where AI automation has been extremely powerful and is extremely powerful. And I would say 85 to 90% of people, maybe even more, don't even know that just that right there is would add maybe like 40% more productivity minimum to their business. And so that in and of itself is going to provide value, right? But the dream, the vision is that that AI agent, right? Just that multi-agent. I mean, I'm anyway, that AI agent kind of system, that agentic system that can go and do stuff, right? The Jarvis. That's where we're trying to go. And so that's kind of our mindset behind how we're architecting these solutions. And so that's why our our thought was, well, the only thing missing, I'm actually posting a YouTube video about this in the next couple of days, but the thought was the only thing missing, if we set up the technology in the way that I said earlier, the only thing missing is the purpose for the agent. What is it supposed to do, right? And that's where the humans come in. And so that's why we've whittled it down to the only thing you need to do is add the prompt, right? And so if we look, we have the name. So in this case, it's coordinate and schedule meetings, right? We have a description because I think I'm going to have to add a routing agent to kind of sit in between the trigger and the super agent, Mallory, because, an email can come in and there could be many different things that could apply. And so we kind of need a router agent to see the name of the prompt and the description and determine which prompt to run, right? Which one to pass on to the agent. So that's why I added a description to these. And then we have the actual prompt. So in this one, it's to coordinate meetings. So we could CC Mallory in an email conversation that we're having, and she'll go in and help with that back and forth coordinating meetings between all the parties who are on that email chain, right? This one is drafting follow-up emails after sales calls. This one was for Weldon in particular. He wanted this one, so that's why you see Weldon right here. So after a sales call, Mallory will go, it has about us as well. Mallory will go, ingest the transcript, uh, go and pull the contact record of the person that we were talking to or people we were talking to, and then generate the follow-up email that Weldon should be sending, right? And then it'll send that email to Weldon. Weldon will read it, say, okay, I like it, and then he'll send it off, right? So it is truly separate. It's not generating a draft and saving it in Weldon's inbox. It's emailing him the draft, and then Weldon will decide what to do. Now we can make it to where it does have control over Weldon's inbox, but in my opinion, it's easier to kind of build and manage these things if we treat them as separate entities entirely, like an additional employee in a way. We have general assistance. This one is mainly for Slack that kind of just, hey, if we ask you to do something, do it, right? Do it reliably, right? And then this one is proposal generation. So if we need to generate a proposal after sales call, it can do that, right? Okay, let's see what happened with this deck. That was one that I wired up this morning. So, even though you do some testing, if you're not doing the proper testing that you're supposed to be doing, then it's just, it's unreliable, right? You can't really push it to production. Okay, the issue was the activity log, but this is the link itself right here. Let's see. Yep. There's the proposal. That's probably the wrong execution. Okay. That's the proposal generator. Google Drive agent was the one that I actually executed. So that's probably the one that I should be clicking on. Got the document. Search query was wrong. Query, text, session ID. Look, I'm doing a little bit of troubleshooting live, so you can see that these systems can be finicky if you don't do the proper testing and hook it up in a reliable way. So new file name, action, search. Okay, so the action should have been copy, right? Which basically means that, action copy, and it used the search tool. If the action is not search, delete, or download, always use the file ID for search. So you can retrieve the Google Drive link. Let's see. So what I have it do basically what this one's supposed to do is always end the workflow on search so it can pull the Google Drive link. Because usually it'll just say, hey, yeah, we made the copy. Here's the ID. We don't need the ID. We need the link so we can open it up. So if it has to make a copy, it should make the copy and then search for the link that it just copied. Now, the issue is it never hit the copy, right? So this, in my opinion, turns it into a prompt issue, right? Which is the whole point. Because now we know, okay, it's not a technical thing, it's not this or it's not that, it's literally just the prompt. And the prompt is something that we can just go in and test, fairly easily, right? If we can just manage it from a central point like here, and we can see the logs in an effective way, then it's really just like, okay, let me update the prompt, and then let's go see the log to see if it's like working appropriately, right? As opposed to, oh, it errored, let me go dig into N8N like I just did to try to figure out what's all going on with these multiple different workflows that are all talking together and working and whatever, right? So let's just show a couple of other examples and see if it works. Let's send an email to Daniel asking if he has time to meet today. Let's go see. Let's go see some executions. All right, Mallory's working. These are other agents that kind of work in the background. You can see she pulled the Agentic CRM so she can grab Daniel's email. Then ideally she hit the email agent. So ideally Daniel would have received an email, hit the Slack agent so it could send me back my message, right? And then the Slack message went off because it's Mallory just sent a Slack message and that triggered the Slack message again. But in this workflow, we have a filter. If it comes from Mallory, don't send it to Mallory, basically, which is why you don't see Mallory show up here. And so it sent it back, sent an email to Daniel Kalen. So you see, there's a little bit of a user learning, right? Because we have multiple Daniels in here. It's not going to know exactly who I'm talking about. So let me say, apologize to Daniel Kalen for sending that email. You sent it to the wrong person. Send it to Daniel W. and CC Devin. With Slack, you have to upgrade in order to see the actual user's information, and we're just not going to upgrade right now. So I have to tell it like my name. Kind of annoying, but one of those things. Do executions. Daniel, let me know if you get that email. Errored on the RAG. We'll check that out in a second. But it tried it again. So it tried it, succeeded. Maybe it got something wrong. Then it tried it again, errored. Then it tried it again, right? So it'll keep trying until it works. But this is kind of the information that as an agent developer, you want to know, right? Because on the user side, it might work. Like Daniel might have actually got that email. And so to him and for me, it doesn't matter. It worked. But for us, in terms of efficiency, we have to go dig in and figure out what happened here. Why didn't it work the first time, right? And likely these things aren't perfect, right? Okay. If you need further assistance, Daniel, did you get that email?
Not yet.
Okay.
But I'll let you know as soon as I get it.
Perfect. Let's go see the email agent. Send message, sent, Daniel W. At example.com. Do you see, like, without the testing, it can be wired up perfectly, but then it'll execute perfectly and it'll say, hey, this worked or this didn't work. But if you're not actually testing appropriately, you're not going to know that it sent it to daniel.w at example.com instead of Daniel's actual email, right? My guess is that in the Agentic CRM, part of the reason why it failed was because his email might not be in there, right? Because we're still working on these agentic database systems. I told you guys I was going to riff today. We're doing a little bit of RAG here. My name. Let's pull this up. Daniel Kalen. My guess is this was Daniel W. Query Daniel W. Yep. And so it sent the query Daniel W instead of just Daniel, which is a prompt thing, right? What I wanted it to do was just query Daniel, pull up all the Daniels, and then figure out which one was Daniel W, right? And so that was my intent. But what it inferred was, okay, Daniel W is the name, right? And so that's what it queried. And so it's like that miscommunication is something where it's like, like I said at the beginning, you can make the prompt super long and comprehensive and every detail is there, or you can make it super broad. And if it's broad, it's not going to be within the guidelines or the guardrails that you want it to be in. But there's a interesting kind of communication mechanism happening here where, like, if I said Daniel W to Weldon would know what I mean. But if I say it to an LLM is being a little bit too like autistic about it. Like, no offense to anybody who is, but it's being a little too literal about it, right? And so this is also something that we're trying to figure out, right? We have three roadmap items: user interaction, user interface, agentic database, and the communication between users and the LLM, right? How do we clean that up? Maybe we have to wait, right? Maybe it's just a three GPT-5 thing, right? An LLM kind of improvement. Or maybe there's some stuff that we can do with the prompting to improve the reliability here. Or maybe it's a user manual type thing. Like maybe we have to teach the users how to communicate with this so it works more reliably. Ideally, we don't have to do the last part, right? Ideally, they just improve the models like tomorrow and all of this is fixed. But realistically, none of those things are kind of ideal right now. So we have to focus on the middle thing, which is how do we build the scaffolding around the system to where when somebody is communicating with the LLM, the intent is actually understood, right? And that's probably, in terms of architecture, it's likely going to be pairing LLMs. It's kind of a method that we've used in the past, which is there's one LLM that is in charge of actually generating the output in another LLM that checks, right? So we have these two LLMs kind of working together. It should, and it usually does, massively kind of improve either the reasoning or the output, like the content that's being generated, right? And so if you're talking to any kind of AI agency and they're indicating that they kind of have it all figured out or their methods are foolproof, battle tested, tried and true, they're just either misinformed and they can't really see the forest for the trees, or uh, they're just kind of like lying about it, because this is all new technology, it's all emerging and everyone's figuring it out as we go, right? There is no path laid ahead of us. We're kind of taking shots somewhat in the dark, but the more we do this, the more data that we have, and the more our shots can be more and more precise, right? And so, like I said, we have some roadmap items. Things aren't perfect yet. Obviously, I tried to do a live demo and we ran into a couple of errors, which was not ideal. And I could probably try to do a couple other things like schedule a meeting with Ross and Devin for 10 p.m. tonight. We'll see if this one works. And then after that one, I'll probably say like, send an email to Weldon and Andrew Lewis asking if they can join that meeting. After that, I might have it create a doc in Google Drive just to show if that capability works. But if this fails on the scheduling, which it didn't, thank God, that would have been embarrassing. Let's open it up. Meeting Ross and Devin right here. Boom. Perfect. Created by Mallory. Nice discussion. Let's fire off the next one. One after that, I might do like create a file called new file and put, hey guys, that's the content. All right, it sent the email. Let's go check the email. I don't really want to open up my email right now, to be honest with you guys, but we can see it here. Okay, Google Drive just ran. Email agent, that's what we're looking for. Could also probably just go look at the logs. Oh, new file, that worked. sent an email. I've sent an email to Weldon, CC'd, right? But let's go actually see what the email looked like. Email was successfully sent. Send email. Request to join the meeting. Subject line. Hey, Weldon. Hey, Weldon and Andrew. Hope you're doing well. Wanted to check if you could join the meeting scheduled. Let's see. Sent it straight to Weldon. No, Andrew. Sorry, Andrew. Oh, Andrew got CC'd. Smart. Cool. So the email was sent. Let's see about this new file. Open that up. Hey, guys. Fantastic. Awesome. Now let's like have it generate a proposal. It's going to send me a form, innate in form, which is cool. Full name, we'll do John Smith. We'll do John at email.com. Test 1, 2, 3. Amount $1 million or whatever that is. Devin Kearns. Transcript. So the transcript is key, right? The transcript is kind of that unstructured data that is able to pull and generate the actual proposal. I'm pulling this one from our conversation with Zach. So I don't know how much information is going to be on there, but it's going to be a transcript. Let's actually just change this to like Zach Alexander. So it's a little bit more. We're going to generate proposal. Fantastic. And so the agent's going to go through. It's going to call the proposal generator, and it's going to spit me back this proposal, ideally, right? Mallory's kind of our testing bed. It's kind of the one that we're always testing new concepts on. And so it's one of those that we use, like we honestly should probably separate it because we use it, but then we're also testing on it. And so it becomes kind of this thing where it's like, oh, it didn't work. It's like, oh, it's because I'm in here troubleshooting and testing it. Like that happens a little bit too much. So we likely are just going to kind of have to separate these two things, create a new agent entirely as our testing one, and then just leave Mallory alone. And then whatever's done after testing and proven, we'll then go and like add it to Mallory, right? This right here, this webinar is telling me that that's ideally what we need to, that's exactly what we need to do, right? Okay, so the proposal generator ran. Let's see if it's in here. It should have sent me it back, but it didn't. But let's see. Proposal, it generated it. Fantastic. This is kind of this is exactly how we set up our proposals. But what it's supposed to do, and this is a prompt thing, right? I added the proposal generator today. I was going to do it live, but I added it today because I wanted to test it and I didn't want it to not work, and it's already not working. But you can kind of see how it's like, you got to do this the right way. And if you can get it perfect in there, then it's all about the prompt. But let's check this out. Let's see what happened. Proposal went through. We got this link here, but for some reason,
Yep.
finance analytics system testing 1, 2, 3, put his name in there. Fantastic. And then it filled this out. So if I look at we have a template here. This is the template that we use for our proposals. So the name is a variable, the overview is a variable, like prepared by, prepared for, the date, and then the entire kind of SOW. It gives us like a draft of the SOW based on our typical phases that we follow to build these things, right? So we set up the data, we do the testing, right? And then we do end-to-end testing once we do final integrations. Assumptions and notes. It's able to fill these sections out because in the prompt, we instruct it, hey, for phase 1, this is what we do. For phase 2, this is what we do. For assumptions and notes, these are the typical things that we kind of need to know in order to do a good job, right? Project summary, installment date. And so we have this template set up, right? And then here, it should put company name as well. In this case, it didn't, right? And it should put contact full name and team full name here, ideally, right? But we kind of eliminated this section for some of it. So anyway, that's the proposal generation. Does anybody have any idea? Let's actually really quick. I just want to figure out why it didn't send back the proposal to me. If you guys don't mind me doing a little bit of debugging here live. So got the proposal, and what it did was it just didn't output it back to me. And what it looks like is the prompt didn't get pulled. So I must have messed something up on the trigger workflow this morning when I set it up, because there's obviously no prompt. All it has is today's date. The transcript was empty, and all it has is this context. And it still tried to generate me a fake proposal, right? At least it knew this information, but it still tried to generate me like some kind of fake proposal, right? So obviously there was something that I messed up here. If you guys are interested in me debugging this, I can go in and like debug. But if not, feel free to shoot me out questions live right now that I can test Mallory on. You guys know its capabilities, right? It has these actions: email actions, counter actions, Slack, Google Drive, proposal, etc. I could probably ask it about conversations that we've had. Um, well, do you have any ideas of conversations that we've had that I can ask it about that wouldn't be like, it could be something that I could actually query and show people live publicly? Maybe not. Let's say mm, you know, summarize Ross and summarize Ross's call with, let's go look at calendar really quick. Yeah, we'll do like our all sales call. Why not? Summarize our all sales meeting from yesterday. I mean, that might be a little bit much, but we'll see. We'll see. No all sales meeting. So obviously, live demo, probably not the best demo, frankly, because Mallory's initial capabilities were scheduling meetings and doing the sales call follow up email thing, right? Everything else has been added over the last 2-3 days and hasn't gone through the testing cycle that we normally go through, right? So obviously, like, because this technology is so new, because it's emerging, if you're not doing testing and you just kind of assume that it's going to work, you're in a bad spot, right? This is why, like, when you're on YouTube and you're looking at all of these, AI agents, all of these AI agent videos, they're all POCs, right? They're all like, bare minimum MVPs, but realistically, they're POCs and not fully production ready, right? So if you're going to make it production ready, one, you have to make sure that the scenarios that it's executing tasks on are well understood and you understand where the liability points are. And at those points, you add in either multiple checks from other LLMs or human in the loop. And then two, you just have to test the prompt over and over again. And frankly, like, the testing method on the prompt isn't anything super complex. It's really just a manual process of running it through hundreds of times and then looking at the output and the steps that it took, right? And then logging against what it's supposed to do, right? Benchmarking against what it's supposed to do. And then what we're shooting for is well above 90% effectiveness, right? Depends on what the workflow is. If it's to respond to a customer for customer support and it's like like a high value interaction where there could be refunds or refunds is the biggest thing, refunds or discounts, that needs to be kind of be perfect every time, right? Maybe it can mess up one or two times here or there, but like ideally it's perfect every time. And so we add a little bit more structure to that, right? Maybe we decrease the prompt a little bit and make each step along the way a pure instruction, right? There's various methods that you can do, but basically it's like whatever you're shooting for, whatever you're benchmarking against, how good does it need to be? Does it need to be 85? Does it need to be 60%? Does it need to be 100%, which is almost impossible? And then we try to reach that number through the testing. Once we set up all the tooling and it works, right, then it's really just testing the prompt. The first stage of testing is making sure the tooling works, right, which is what I didn't do, which is why we're running into errors. But if I did that, the tooling would work, and then I could show, hey, let me just add another thing to the prompt, and then we could see it live, right? So obviously, the not the best demo live. It's funny when it works in the morning for like an hour, going through multiple different tests, which is what you guys saw earlier. Like, it was working fine, and then when you do it live, it doesn't work, right? That's just kind of classic software. So I'm gonna stop rambling and open it up to you guys if you guys have any questions.